Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into a realm where cutting-edge artificial intelligence meets some truly fascinating and deep mathematics.
That's right.
Transformers have revolutionized AI, making incredible leaps in language, images, everything, but they often feel like these complex black boxes.
Very much so, yeah.
So our deep dive today is into this brilliant and definitely academic paper, Intrinsic and Extrinsic Organized Attention, Softmax Invariance and Network Sparsity by Fasina and colleagues.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how this paper helps bridge what they call a measurable gap.
A measurable gap.
Yeah, between the theory behind transformers and, well, our ability to really interpret how they work.
Gotcha.
So our mission today is to pull out the key nuggets from their research, focusing on their innovative mathematical approaches.
And show how these new tools are actually shedding light on how these powerful models work.
Exactly. Get ready for some, hopefully some aha moments along the way.
All right. So you mentioned this measurable gap in understanding transformers. Why is that such a critical problem? I mean, they work incredibly well, right?
They do.
Why do we need to know how they work beyond just knowing that they work?
That's a really good question. And the paper touches on this. Transformers, since, Vaswani et al., in 2017, they've absolutely changed fields like language and vision processing.
No doubt.
But despite all that success, we often don't fully understand the why behind their decisions. And this interpretability gap, it's a real challenge.
Especially for deploying AI responsibly.
Precisely. In high-stakes areas, you need that understanding. So the paper aims to close this gap by using this lens of tensor organization.
Tensor organization. Okay, that sounds pretty advanced.
It is, but think of it like trying to systematically organize chaos,
Right.
making the data inside the transformer understandable.
Okay, so how do they actually propose to tackle this? What are the specific analytical tools they're bringing in? This sounds like the core academic innovation.
It really is. They rely on two main tools, and their application here is quite innovative.
All right, what's the first one?
The first is paradifferential calculus, or you might hear it called paraproduct decompositions.
Okay.
It's a mathematical framework, originally from Jean-Michel Bony back in '81. It's had a big impact in pure and applied math.
And the core idea is?
Informally, it's about breaking down complex operators into their, let's say, low and high frequency parts, like separating the baseline from the fine details.
Right.
But the key innovation here, in Oluwadamilola Fasina's 2025 work cited in the paper, is extending that framework.
Extending it how?
To allow similar decompositions, specifically for smooth, nonlinear transformations of tensors. Tensors that have this property called mixed holder regularity.
Okay, you lost me a bit with mixed holder regularity. Can you simplify that? Why is that specific property important?
Yeah, absolutely. Think of regularity simply as smoothness, like how predictable the data is without wild jumps. Alpha holder regularity measures that smoothness based on distance. Mixed alpha holder regularity, then, extends that idea to functions with multiple variables.
So smooth in all directions at once.
Kind of, yeah. It guarantees this smoothness across all dimensions. And this specific type of smoothness is a crucial mathematical assumption. It's what allows the paradifferential decomposition to actually work on this data.
It makes the math applicable.
Exactly. And it's also, interestingly, deeply connected to wavelet theory, specifically the Hare wavelet system, which they use to characterize this smoothness.
Fascinating. Okay, so that's tool number one. What's the second?
The second is the questionnaire method for tensor organization.
The questionnaire method.
Yeah, it's an existing methodology, originally described by Coifman and Gavish, with more details from Ankenman later.
And what does it do?
The core idea is pretty clever. It organizes multidimensional data tensors by thinking about the coordinates on each axis, like points on a graph. This process leads to a coherent organization where the data becomes, as they say, smooth with respect to the underlying geometry.
So it imposes a kind of smooth structure.
Right. And the innovation here is applying it to the really complex three tensors you find inside transformer attention mechanisms.
And why is that organization useful?
Because it makes it possible to do signal processing tasks efficiently on that data and to analyze properties like sparsity, which we'll get to.
Okay, so these two tools, paradifferential calculus and the questionnaire method brought together, what's the mission they accomplish by combining them?
Well, they really complement each other perfectly. It's a powerful pairing.
How so?
Paradifferential calculus gives them the theoretical framework. It explains what happens inside an attention head after it's been organized to be smooth by the questionnaire method.
Ah, I see.
And the questionnaire method is the practical algorithm that does the organizing. Both inside a single head, they call that intrinsic organization, and across all the heads in the network, extrinsic organization.
So theory and practice working together, intrinsic and extrinsic. Got it.
Exactly. It's a key innovative link in their work.
All right, this is where it gets really interesting for me. One of the paper's core claims, a big innovation, is theoretical evidence for softmax invariance.
Yes.
If we're trying to peek inside the black box, this sounds like finding a window. What is intrinsic organization more concretely, and why is finding invariance profound?
So intrinsic organization is about that structural arrangement within one single attention head, getting it tidy, essentially.
Okay.
And the theoretical breakthrough is showing that if an attention head is organized intrinsically to have that mixed alpha holder regularity, the smoothness we talked about,
Right, the smoothness.
then the self-attention mechanism actually becomes invariant to the softmax function.
Invariant, meaning the softmax doesn't fundamentally change things.
In a crucial way, yes. The softmax is nonlinear, and it can sometimes over-squash values, making it hard to interpret the raw attention scores directly.
Yeah, it warps the picture.
Right. But this invariance finding suggests that the underlying structure, the relationships captured by a well-organized head, they basically persist. They remain essentially unchanged even after the softmax does its thing.
Wow. Okay, that is significant. It gives a more stable basis for interpretation.
Exactly, a much deeper theoretical understanding of why attention works. It's shown rigorously using that paradifferential calculus, their decomposition theorem.
So the math backs it up.
Under certain conditions, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if the network loss decreases as certain wavelet coefficients grow, basically.
Yeah.
When the network is learning effectively, the softmax part simplifies mathematically, implying this invariance.
That's a heavy theoretical claim. Do they show this works in practice, like with real transformers?
They absolutely do. They provide computational examples using two very well-known models.
Which ones?
First, Transformer XL or TXL, that's a language model, 16 layers, 8 heads per layer, trained on Wikitext 103.
Okay, a standard language setup.
And second, VIT B16, a vision transformer, 12 layers, 12 heads per layer, fine-tuned on the CFAR10 image dataset.
So language and vision covered. How do they show the invariance?
They use visualizations, figures 1 and 2 in the paper. Figure 1 visually compares original attention heads from both models against their holder-organized versions.
And you can see the smoothness.
You can, qualitatively. You see the organized ones look smoother, which is needed for the theory. Then figure 2 compares the mathematical approximation based on their theory with the direct softmax output.
And what does that show?
For the TXL head, they point out how the regular softmax over-squashes some parts, while their approximation preserves some of the structure. It's similar for the VIT head, too.
So the visuals support the theory.
It's compelling qualitative evidence, yes.
That's great to see theory connect with practice. But are there limitations? Any catches to this finding?
That's a fair question. They do acknowledge some restrictive assumptions.
Such as?
Well, the holder organization process itself involves permuting, rearranging the original matrix elements in the attention head. So the organized head and the original are only really equivalent up to large constants. That can make it a bit tricky to directly interpret the organized structure intuitively and map it perfectly back.
So it's not a perfect one-to-one mapping.
Not quite. And there's a minor empirical thing. For the map to work nicely in the examples, the attention head dimensions often needed to be a power of 2.
Ah.
So, for instance, they had to crop the VIT attention head slightly for some analyses. It's something to be aware of.
Okay, practical constraints. Makes sense. So we've looked inside a single head intrinsic organization, but transformers have many heads working together?
Right, 100 sometimes.
How does the research address the extrinsic organization, how all these heads relate, and what does that tell us about the network's overall structure, maybe its efficiency?
Yeah, this is where that questionnaire method really shines again. It's another big methodological contribution.
How do they apply it here?
They use it to organize the network's big 3 tensors, the ones representing queries, keys, and all the attention heads together, hierarchically.
Hierarchically, like a tree structure.
Exactly. The algorithm builds these hierarchical partition trees for the head, query, and key axes. You can see it in their algorithm 1.
And this creates a new geometry.
That's the term they use, yeah. A new geometry where the organized tensors are smooth and regular. And that structure is super useful for analysis, especially for looking at the whole network.
Okay, so what kind of qualitative insights do they get from this big picture view? How the heads relate?
They use some neat visualization techniques. One is diffusion maps.
Diffusion maps.
Yeah, shown in Figure 3. It's a way to reduce dimensionality, non-linearly. It basically shows how attention heads cluster or spread out.
What did they find?
For the TXL language model, the map showed some continuous structure. It suggests maybe a smoother distribution of functions among the heads.
And for the vision transformer?
The VIT map was different. More clustered, they say, and contained some outliers. That might imply more distinct groups of heads, maybe with specialized jobs for vision tasks.
Interesting contrast. What else did they visualize?
They also show the interhead kernel, basically pairwise similarities between all heads, and the attention head tree geometry itself, showing that hierarchical grouping.
So good ways to see the organization. But what about measuring things? You mentioned sparsity earlier. How do they quantify that, and why is sparsity important?
Right, this is another key innovation, quantifying sparsity, using math constructs like expansion coefficients and L1 entropy.
Okay, how does that work?
They project individual heads onto these fundamental patterns called Pei-Chun bases, and the whole network onto a tri-haar basis.
Projecting onto bases, like breaking a signal into components?
Exactly like that. Then they calculate the L1 entropy of the resulting expansion coefficients. Lower L1 entropy means higher sparsity.
And higher sparsity means?
It means fewer fundamental components are needed to represent the information. The signal is simpler, in a way, which implies efficiency, less complexity.
Got it. So what did they find about individual head sparsity?
They visualized the decay of coefficients in Figure 4, showing how few components capture most of the info. And Figure 5 shows the L1 entropy for every single head across different data batches.
And was it consistent?
Yeah, they found a consistent spread of network entropies, which helps validate the method. But here's the really practical insight.
Okay.
An attention head with high L1 entropy, it's busy, it's picking up sharp transitions, doing a lot of processing.
Makes sense.
But a head with low L1 entropy is doing little processing. It's relatively quiet.
Ah. So if some heads are consistently quiet, what does that imply?
Exactly. It points directly towards model pruning.
Removing parts of the network.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
And they found something striking in Table 1. They looked across 6 different data batches for both TXL and VIT.
Yeah.
They found the exact same attention heads consistently showed up in the top 3 most active, high entropy, and bottom 3 least active.
Low entropy.
The same heads every time.
The mode was 6, meaning those specific heads were in the top bottom 3 across all batches they looked at. Wow, so those low entropy heads could potentially be removed.
That's the implication. You could potentially prune them without hurting performance much, leading to smaller, faster, more efficient models that directly tackles the huge resource cost of these large models.
That's a very concrete outcome. Did they also look at sparsity for the whole network?
They did. The method extends using that tri-haar basis. And this led to another practical use case, comparing network architectures.
How?
By comparing the overall network L1 entropies, shown in Table 2 and Figure 6, they found TXL networks generally had comparatively larger L1 entropies than VIT networks.
Meaning TXL is less sparse overall?
Or maybe processing more high-frequency content, as they suggest. It could also relate to the different data sets, text versus images.
Right, different tasks.
But it gives you a quantitative way to compare how different architectures process information, or how one model behaves on different data.
Very useful. Any final caveats on this extrinsic organization part or the questionnaire method itself?
Yes, they do mention the questionnaire algorithm can be a bit sensitive to its initial parameters. How you set it up matters.
Okay.
And they're careful to state that their computational experiments are really demonstrations of potential use cases. They aren't making broad general claims about network inference based solely on these results. Statistical significance wasn't the main goal.
Got it. It's about showcasing the method's potential.
Exactly, showing the utility and the innovation of the approach.
Okay. So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here? We've gone deep into intrinsic and extrinsic organized attention, softmax invariance, sparsity. What does it all mean?
Well, connecting it to the bigger picture, I think this research offers a really novel and, importantly, rigorous mathematical way to understand transformer attention's inner workings, which has been quite elusive.
Addressing that interpretability gap we started with.
Directly, by providing solid evidence for softmax invariance using paradifferential calculus and introducing this powerful framework, the questionnaire algorithm tensor organization, to both visualize and quantify network structure.
And it has real practical consequences.
Absolutely. Enabling things like data-driven model pruning, providing tools for comparing architectures, it makes these powerful AI models potentially more efficient and, crucially, more interpretable.
So not just knowing that they work, but getting closer to how they work.
It's a significant step in that direction, yes.
This deep dive really shows that even these incredibly complex AI models, maybe they can be demystified. With the right tools, some mathematical creativity.
And maybe looking in fields we didn't expect connections from before.
Right. It highlights how our understanding is evolving, moving beyond just observing behavior to actually comprehending the mechanisms underneath.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener. As these AI models get ever more complex, ever more integrated into everything, what other tools or insights do you think could unlock new levels of understanding?
Maybe from fields that seem totally unrelated now?
Could be. Mathematics, physics, maybe even biology. Where else might the keys lie to truly understanding and optimizing these technologies? It makes you think about how interconnected these fields are becoming.